Hi there, welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while. How have you been? Don't answer that. I don't really care how you've been. I'm kidding, I really do care. Lately, I've had a lot of associates and friends of mine tell me that I am very prominent in certain fields. Those fields including Combine voice changers. And today, luckily for you, I'm going to be going through my entire list of what I have here. Just take a look at this beauty that we have lined up right over here. Absolutely wonderful. We're probably not going to be talking about these two, but well, we're going to talk about the most important ones first.
With these things in mind, we are going to have to go over a couple of different displays, of course.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Scientist. We're going to need a lot of different things before we even get started on this. First and foremost, you're going to want to head over to ImageLine and you're going to get yourself a copy of FL Studio. I don't care how you do it, just so long as you do it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you to go get yourself a torrent or whatever of FL Studio. You get it however you want. I'm not going to condone it or whatever, but the free version, the trial version, is not really going to do you too much good. The audio cable is going to help you be able to take the sound from one program and send it into another one. I'm not going to tell you how to install it right now, however, I will actually teach you how to use it properly in a good manner. So, with the virtual audio cable, what you need to do is, once you have it installed, or you install it, you turn off your computer and reset it so that it's actually working properly, and then, you do your process. You open up FL Studio, and then you do what you have to do. Another good program to have is G-Form. It'll be very useful for certain situations involving the Combine, civil protection, and the rest of it. So if you do not have it already, you can head down here, click it, and do whatever you have to do to find it. Once you do that, you're going to head to Add, More Plugins, and then Manage Plugins. You'll make sure that you have your plugin put into your ImageLine or FL Studio file somewhere, either in the plugins file or wherever it has to be. And once you do that, you're just going to press Find Installed Plugins. This will send the program into a whole process of downloading and looking for other programs. The process does take a while. However, once you're done, you should be able to use G-Form to your liking. If it doesn't show up in this list afterwards, then you're just going to have to go through your directory and find out where it is and find the problem yourself. A good way to test it is by opening it here and seeing if it works properly.
Now then, let's get to lesson 2, baby!
Let's go on to our first Combine voice changer. This is your only really important area. This is your mixer track. These are all extremely useful to you if you're going to have multiple voice changers ready at your demise. Don't worry about that, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to start with the Half-Life 2 normal old Combine civil protection, and I guess you could say it was the soldiers as well.
Alright, let's get started. As you can tell, my voice is completely different. Just by a click of a button, I sound like I'm directly out of Half-Life 2. Anyone pick up a 647E reading here? Copy that.
Now, in order to set up the Metro Cop, what you're going to want to do is, first things first, the limiter here is only so that you don't pick up any background noises. Don't really worry about it unless you have a lot of background noise. The threshold here is what really makes it really important to use. However, I don't really use that anymore as the limiter is on my first channel. So essentially, the only real use of the limiter is to eliminate background noise. I'm not going to go over the complicated of it, so, you can probably find it somewhere yourself anyways. What you want to do is, you want to get yourself a parametric EQ. The original look is going to look a little bit like this. What you want to do is try to set it up as closely as you can to what I have here in this one over here. Feel free to take a picture of what I have here now and try to compare yours to this. It's a little bit of a complicated process, but with enough effort, you should be able to get close to it at the very least. Number 1 is at 327 Hz. Number 3 is at 452, number 5 is at 2843, number 6 is at 2497, and number 7 is all the way down here at 4277. If you're having trouble trying to put these together, pay close attention to the numbers down here. 20 to 10K, treble, sub, and all that stuff. That's a good indication of where you should put these markers. In the end, you should sound something like this. Like you're coming through a radio or something like that. On to the next, we'll be down to the compressor. Now, The compressor is just something that makes your voice loud, in this case. What you want is the threshold to be all the way to 0 dB, ratio to be all the way down, gain to be 14 dB, attack to be 15 milliseconds, release to be 200 milliseconds, and type here, you want that to be all the way down to hard. That'll make you sure that your gain is at least higher, and you'll be able to be heard with a little more volume. Up next here is the vocodex. The vocodex makes you just sound a little more loud than you have been for the last little while. As long as you play around with the vocodex for a little while, you should be able to use it properly. Feel free to pause and try your best to mimic what I have on screen here. After our vocodex, notice how this EQ right up here is the same exact one as the one up here. What you want to do is take this version of your parametric EQ. You want to try to duplicate them as well as possible, because you're going to need it. It'll be useful to you, as you can tell by the way it sounds. Up next, you're just gonna want your G form. You're gonna want this G form to be set to -12 pitch and -3 format. At least, that's what it is for me. Everyone else has their own personal tuning to their own voice. So don't follow me perfectly, but do something that you think works for your own voice.
It makes you understandable. Even I'm changing my voice changes as we speak. And if you really have to, just add another parametric EQ and try your best to raise it as much as you can in order to get the proper sound you like. You never know what works for your voice or somebody else's voice. So keep it in mind. And there you have it. You have the Metro Cop, the basic Metro Cop from Half-Life 2. Now that that's done, we don't have to talk about the next one coming up.
Trust me, you don't want to. So, we're not going to talk about that.
No, really, we are not gonna talk about it. Now, we're going to move on to all the combined forces used in Half-Life Alyx. Now, the problem with these is, these ones use a little bit more of an expensive tool that may or may not be hard to find on your own. It's not really going to make up too big of a difference for a couple of voice changers, but it will make a couple of differences in a couple of certain other voice changers. Some voice changers this program will be useful, others not so much. However, the program in question is Vocal Synth 2. This program is going to be very useful in the future as we come along, because this is what was used for making the voice changers in Half-Life Alyx, or at least something close to it. So, without further ado,
Why don't we get started?
Not so fast, folks. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I had a very important message from the future. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on voice changer programs and stuff like that. You can hire me now using Fiverr. Using Fiverr, people can pay me in order to make voice lines using these voice changers. And remember, any bit of support helps me a lot. It could even help me push out animations faster. If you're ever interested, the link will be in the description below. Alright, back to the video. Now, first things first. There is a tutorial for a Combine Grunt voice changer somewhere around here, but I'm gonna go over it again, and as a matter of fact, I will try to link the original place where I got this voice changer in the description wherever I can. However, before we get started, here is the voice changer that we have to start with. What I do is, I take my main voice from FL Studio, and I send it to an effector first. The effector here just gives a little bit of lo-fi sounding, filter to my voice, just before we get sent to our Combine voice changer stylistic sound. This will be useful in the long run because if you pay close attention to the Grunt voice lines, the S sounds whenever they make a noise are low quality, and thus this will simulate that low quality S and that low quality sounding voice from the beginning. It can be as high as you want or as low as you want, but I like it here, as if you go too far, it'll just start to distort, and then you're gonna want to send yourself into a fruity limiter, just to make sure that you're limiting yourself and make sure that you're properly keeping your background noises out, setting your releases, your thresholds, and making sure your gain is all the way down so that it catches any of the background noise, just so that it doesn't go through your microphone as you're speaking.
After that, you head through a G form here, just to make your formant sound a little bit lower. This is what you should be sounding like just after that. This is a very important filter that you're going to need for the future. so just keep that in mind.
The parametric EQ used here is to filter out any of those higher, low quality kind of sound effects. What you want here is that radio medium sound that will keep yourself, you know, not sounding too high quality, like heard there,
Or hearing yourself too low quality like there.
You want your program to be somewhere between here, where you have not that much bass and not too much treble either. Just be careful, because these two can be changed if you use your scroll wheel. The shape can be changed on a whim, so just do what you like and try your best to get it to look just like this. The balancer here, well, that's just to make you sound a little bit louder after being sent through the parametric EQ. Still very useful, and try your best to keep it centered. If you don't, it's going to come out one ear or another ear. You definitely do not want that. You want it to be in the middle to the best of your ability. This is the point where it gets a little bit hard. You have to go through another limiter here, and you have to raise your ceiling just to this point, just so that it doesn't peak your microphone or anything too serious like that. As you see, the path diverges over here, and it has to go through another limiter. But we're not going to go there just yet. We're going to finish up our compressor, which is set to the highest setting here, the lowest ratio, middle gain, 15 millisecond attack, 200 millisecond release, and hard release. After that, we're going to send that to our last compressor here. I'll get back to that later on. Up next, you want to go through another limiter right here. And here, I'll turn this off for us. This sounds like it would be completely worthless, but it's very useful in the long run. You will just have to trust me on this. With the limiter here, you want to have that lowered ceiling just by a little bit. Just make sure that you're safe from any further peaking or the likes. Let's turn off our compressor and see how we sound. The vocodex here gives us this very strange and very robotic sounding voices. It is still extremely useful for the future coming. Why don't you try to feel free to pause the video and try your best to mimic it to the closest of your ability. Now that you've got our vocodex down, you're going to want to go down to the free phaser. This is going to be extremely useful to you. This will give it that sweeping effect that you're going to need. You want to set the free phaser to sweep frequency maxed to 1 Hertz. The minimum depth is going to be set to nothing. Maximum depth is going to be 1, or maxed out. Frequency range is going to be 0. Small. Stereo, like I said, you want no stereo in this. Even the slightest amount of stereo will ruin you, so be careful with that. Number of stages, set that to 10. Any more, it'll be a little bit too hard. And any little, it'll be too little. 10 should be perfect. Your feedback should be set to 0.3. The dry and wet should be set to 100% wet. You don't want any sound coming through here. You want this sound to be fully proper, and then this out, you can set it to normal. Don't even touch it. Up next, it's our good friend, the Fruity Parametric EQ. What you want to do here is try your best to get that low mid-sounding filter going on here. Just above 2K, and just below 100. Last but not least, you want one more filter. Just to make sure that your ceiling is nice and low so that it's not overpowering the main track here. Remember, if it overpowers the main track, then, well, it shouldn't be. Keep that in mind. Last but not least, you send it through to a Fruity compressor, and then you set that compressor to -40, the ratio to 18, the gain to 25, attack to 36.5, release to 4,000, and type to vintage. That should be all you need from there. Remember, it's key to note that one line creates the main sounding voice, and one line creates the filter sounding voice in the background. One can't exist without the other, because if it did, it would just sound strange and peculiar, and nobody likes a strange and peculiar sounding voice changer. Now then, there's one more matter that we should go over here as well. And that is if you have Vocal Synth here. Vocal Synth is a program that can be used to make it sound a little more authentic than it does normally. It doesn't do too much, but it's still very useful, and it makes it sound just that little bit more authentic, like it's straight from the game. Here, let me do some voice lines for you with the full setup. Echo 1 requesting immediate containment. The unit is moving in. Echo 1 is standing by, awaiting further order. Return to your housing block, now. Alright, you're good to go. Stop whining. Stop whining. Stop. Tell her to stop moving. Stop moving. He's kicking it. Overwatch says to stop kicking it.
Hey, it's me again. So, looks like you like the Grunt, don't ya? Well, I'm glad to tell you that from here it gets easier. Much easier. Well, if you have vocal synth, that is. Without vocal synth, these will not be possible unless, of course, somebody is able to mimic these without having vocal synth. If they can, kudos to them. Without further ado, let's get started on the Combine Charger. Now, with the full setup, it sounds extremely quiet. So what I like to do beforehand is add a sound goodizer to the entire mixer track in the beginning. And trust me, this will be useful in the long run. Up next, you want to make sure that you have a limiter just to make sure that the background noise is being filtered out. And once that's done, you keep your limiter on. And here comes the fun part, where we start messing with vocal synth. Now, you don't really need too much from vocal synth. All you really need is the vocoder program here. You want it to be set to -23, vintage, math blaster, 100. You want these three to be selected. This one over here, this one down here. Set it to custom. Register low with the minimum level there. High speed at 85. Strength at 100. Output should be set to 0. Mix should be maxed. Gate should be little. No pan. No width. You want transform and filter. Transform should be set to radio. Width should be 50. Mix should be maxed out. Filter should be on with a frequency of 3090. Resistance of 0. New York LP filter with a mixture of 28. With this, you'll be able to sound
like a Combine Charger. You may notice things a bit hard to understand. So, we get another 3 EQ right here. The parametric EQ is the major win. So we can hear it just a little bit better. This is gonna raise up the voices of the male, just to make it a little bit more understandable. Try to copy this to the best of your ability. You're not gonna be able to copy it perfectly. However, it doesn't have to be exactly right. But feel free to put it to your own voice. After that, we're gonna want to get a frequency splitter.
the frequency splitter here just divides it more so that there's more highlight on the mid frequencies here. With the entire setup activated,
We're going to sound like a Combine Charger here. Let me give you some voice line examples here. Overwatch, dynamic sectors and 0, 3, 17, 4, 8, 9, 11. And your turn. Copy. Do not resist. Alex, it is safe to come out. Target, it is not safe to come out. It is safe to come out. Find infected. Library target is scrambled.
and that, my friends, is how you make the Combine Charger. Now moving on to the Antibody Protection Force unit, better known as the APF or suppressor. In order to make the APF voice changer, what you want to do is start with a G form. You don't have to touch it just yet, but it's good to have for later on use. Of course, as usual, we want our limiter to make sure that there is no noise in the background. Do this as you please, as sometimes the limiter is not really needed, especially if you're doing what I'm doing here, with one channel containing your main voice, and the rest of the channels not really needing the limiter active at all. You want to have vocal synth on here, as well as a parametric EQ just for the ending, to make sure that you can get the treble and the parametric setup right here. Of course, it is the same as the charger, but like I said before, everything can be tuned to your own voice, so keep that in mind. Now, in order to get the exact sound of the APF here, what you want on Vocal Synth 2 here is you want a vocoder, CompuVox, and a Polyvox, active all three at the same time. I'll show you what each one does.
The Polyvox sounds like this. It's going to be really low.
The CompuVox is something that's very important as well. The vocoder here is the most important one. What you want is vintage setting that is in the middle, shifts in vintage 29, maxed out on the input, scale max, Math Blaster is the setting that you want to use. On copy box, you want the bitrate to be 21, bytes to be 0, the output level to be 51, that's to be set to 34, the Russell as their setting, and the lead setting to an LBC mode. Polybox is very useful as well, as it makes it just a tiny bit more understandable. You want that to be set to 47, your format to be set to -2, your character to be set to 100, and your humanization to be set to 0. Because Combine units aren't human, you also want your transform to be set to radio, with a mix setting of 44, and a width of 100. Of course, in order to give yourself the radio sound, you're going to want your parametric EQ. Once I turn that on, it's going to sound like we're being transmitted through a radio, which is very useful.
Now, here's the reason why I say that G-Form is so useful with the EPF. Now, it's gonna sound weird when I do it this way. However, we're sending our voice through a vocal synthesizer here. So it doesn't matter what your voice sounds like through here, but it does matter how you're being transmitted. So I will give you an example of how I sound with G-Form active and without it.
Overwatch, confirming sector is non-sterile, requesting EPF activation. Overwatch, EPF confirmed we have virals inbound. Overwatch, confirming sector is non-sterile, we have incoming virals. Overwatch, confirming sector is non-sterile, we have incoming virals. Overwatch, confirming sector is non-sterile, we have incoming virals.
While the differences may not be too large, it's still large enough to understand the difference between the two. But it all comes down to your personal preference. So what I like may not be the same as what you like, but this is only a suggestion. Now that we're done with the APF, we can move over to the Ordinal unit. These units usually lead large groups of units through the containment zones. Of course, you knew that. However, let's get to it. As you may be able to see here, we have a lot of different things to deal with here, especially a sound goodizer just at the very beginning to make it sound a little bit better, which is always present, the fruity limiter as we've seen every single time so far, a G-form, just to be putting our voice a little bit lower than it has to be.
This is going to be set to -6 and -2, -6 being our pitch, and -2 being our formant. As for vocal synth, we're going to want a couple of different activated programs from here, including BioVox at clarity 100, shift 100, and about halfway on the output level. At Math Blaster, keep that in mind. The vocoder option is going to be hard, shift -18, 80 on the output level, 100 on the scale, and Math Blaster on the load settings. CopyVox is going to be 0 on the bits, 0 on bytes, 43 on the level, bats set to 0, LPC mode set to left, and Planet Galaxy. Talkbox is also going to be set to drive 100, speaker at about 50, the output level 50, frequency response set it to classic, formant set it to 0, and for list of the load settings, the Russell. Mostly everything else is going to be exactly the same as the charger here. However, everything is fit to change whenever you need it to. Let me go through what each tool is supposed to sound like on their own. BioVox should sound like this. Very strange, but very, well, understandable.
The vocoder should sound like this. It's getting there, but it's not there yet.
The CombiVox is supposed to sound like this. It's supposed to give it that strange kind of a radio static kind of sound. The Talkbox is supposed to sound like this. It's a very strange sound, but it'll still be something that you need for the entire product.
And altogether, it's gonna sound like this. Now, this might not sound like anything too serious just yet, but including the rest of the three things that we have here, well, it'll all come together in the long run. Up next, we need a frequency splitter. This frequency splitter is just so we can get rid of all the high frequency sounds here. And they are not really needed. Not right now.
The last frequency splitter here is just to be getting rid of any low frequency sounds.
And then at the very end, we're going to make sure that we have a sound goodizer just to make it sound a little bit better. Overwatch confirming sector is non-zero. APF is in trouble. Copy that. 10-2. Negative. Wrapping off. Overwatch. Indexes and 1 is down. Overwatch. Indexes and 1
And that's what our Ordinal voice changer sounds like. Now then, you may be noticing these ones right over here. Well, they're a little bit different than your normal voice changer. And those ones, maybe I'll get back to those at a different time. If they're so wanted. Don't worry about that one. That's, And thus, that ends our journey through these voice changers. Now, remember that virtual audio cable that we downloaded earlier? Well, in order to use that properly, every time that we open up FL Studio, we're going to want to go up to our options, audio settings, and go into the ISO panel in the audio setting. What you're looking for are these microphone settings right here. You want your input to be set to whichever microphone you're using on a daily basis. It could be a headset microphone or a big serious microphone like I'm using here, thus the Yeti stereo microphone. And you want your output to be set, no matter what, to the cable input. Make sure that it is the cable input. That is very important. After you've done that, it's not done yet. Here's what I do whenever I open FL Studio to use it as a voice changer. I set up my settings, go into the ISO, head into the ISO panel, change my default output to the virtual audio cable input, open up Steam, head to my Steam options, make sure your audio input is set to your cable's output, and make sure your audio output is set to your normal headphones, because you want to hear that picking up on the outside. Just keep this in mind. Your voice is going from your microphone through FL Studio. That goes into the audio cable's input. After the audio cable's input, it's going into the output. The output is going towards Steam, and thus, it's going through Gmod or whatever you're using the voice changer for. This can be done with multiple voice changers. You're not just limited to Combine. Now, another very important note is, you want to head down here. You want to try and find your control panel. Once you find your control panel, you want to go to Hardware and Sound, and you'll get this little window here. Once you get this little window, you're going to go to Recording. You're going to want to set your default communications device to the virtual audio cable. The only reason why you do this is because Gmod doesn't go by whatever microphone you have active. It goes by whatever the system's default device is. You cannot change it on your own. And in order to test that, you want to go into Gmod and open up a mic test from there. Just always double check and triple check and make sure you're actually getting a input sound or voice coming through there before you do any kind of a server hop or anything like that. Hearing your own voice through the vocoder while you're playing always helps you out. Keep it in mind. It doesn't have to be maxed out or very loud, just quiet enough to where you can hear it and you know what you sound like when you're coming through. With that said, that's pretty much the basics. If you ever run into any problems, feel free to leave a comment down below. And with that, I believe I've gone over everything I've had to. Feel free to like or subscribe. I don't know, I'm not your mother. Do what you want.
And with that, I bid you farewell.